Pan-Africanist organization, and it was modeled after the Organization of African Unity, which was founded in 1960. So he even tried to match the Constitution so that the Constitution of the Organization of Afro-American Unity would have a connection with the Organization of African Unity. But when Malcolm is kicked out of the Nation of Islam, again, Elijah Muhammad basically makes a blanket statement like, people need to show where they stand, something to that effect. And so people start writing articles about, and then putting it in Muhammad Speaks about how Malcolm is worthy of death, and Malcolm is not the right person. And Filbert and Wilfred, the brothers of Malcolm X, both write articles appearing in Muhammad Speaks, condemning their brother as a hypocrite, and a Judas, and a Benedict Arnold of the Nation of Islam. Nebraska, so he wasn't born in Michigan. He lived here in the 1930s. His father was, of course, murdered. We're going to talk about his murder after we've done reading the Markham. His father was a minister, Earl Little. He was killed on the Michigan Avenue streetcars. Family, because of after he died, Louise was unable to get insurance payout because of her husband's death. Even though they had been paying insurance, she couldn't get a settlement from the insurance company because they claimed this was a suicide. So because they claimed it was a suicide, they refused to pay her any money. So she was unable to support the family, and the family got separated. The two oldest, Wilfred and Hilda, stayed here in the home. I mean, it wasn't these kind of homes, it was an actual house. And this was actually very rural. The reason they moved here is because they wanted to do some farming. So they moved in this rural area, it wasn't a street like this. And so they had a house, and then a big area of land for farming, and they raised animals as well. Chickens, I mean, that's the only animals they raised was chickens. So they got separated, and then he ended up being first in a foster home about a mile down the street. So he would see his older brother and sister when he would go to school. But then after, they moved him from one place to another, so he ended up in Mason, Michigan. And basically he lost his contact. I need something to drink. But he lost his contact with his brother and sister and the rest of his family, because they were all broken up now. And it was in Mason where the public school teacher told him that, what do you want to be, Malcolm? And they asked all the students, and the students told what they want to be. But of course, when it got to Malcolm, he said he wanted to be a lawyer. He had already been elected as class president. He was a great speaker, so he wanted to be a lawyer. And of course, after he said that, the teacher said, a lawyer's not a good job for you. You should be a carpenter, you should work with your hands, because my people wouldn't hire you to be no lawyer. Even your own people wouldn't hire you to be a lawyer. A lawyer is just not a good job for a nigga. So, of course, that discouraged him. He got involved in crime. He ended up living with his sister Ella in Boston, his older sister in Boston. His father had married, before he married Louise, he had married another woman and had children. And so Ella was from his first marriage. Louise is his second wife, and Malcolm is from that marriage. So he ended up, of course, in prison. He was in prison where his three brothers had already converted to Islam, and joined the Nation of Islam. They wrote to him in prison and told him about the Nation of Islam, and when they visited him, eventually he converted to the Nation of Islam while in prison. But while in prison, he read intensely, and when he got out of prison, he continued to read intensely, and he had, again, outside people who were in the Nation of Islam, but also people outside the Nation of Islam who he consulted, read, discussed matters with. So So he had more than what most members of the Nation of Islam, or most ministers of the Nation of Islam, he had more than their level of information. They had a newspaper before that, Final Call to Islam, which was started by Elijah Muhammad. But the one that most people know was started by Malcolm X, Muhammad Speaks. He traveled all over the country and organized new temples. The temple in Philadelphia was started by Malcolm, the one in Boston, the one in Atlanta, the one in Los Angeles, so another one in Cleveland. All of those were started by Malcolm. Malcolm is who came up with the idea of the carpool for the Savior's Day convention. Before, Savior's Day really was for the people who were from that city. It was mainly Detroit and Chicago. So you were either from Detroit or Chicago, or you were one of the people who had some money and you was able to, get a car, get you a hotel room, pay for all that stuff on your own. Everybody else just missed Savior's Day. You had to tell them about it. Or they had to read about it in the newspaper. They didn't get the chance to go. Malcolm organized the carpool system so that Savior's Day actually became like a homecoming for the Nation of Islam, which is what it is today. And people like Malcolm who didn't want to become members of the Nation of Islam. And that was unlike the other ministers. You generally didn't hear any of the other ministers of the Nation of Islam unless you yourself was a member of the Nation of Islam. But Malcolm, because of his street speaking, because of his speaking in different public venues, he became admired by people who never were thinking about joining the Nation of Islam, but they liked what Malcolm had to say. And so Malcolm ends up becoming the most significant member of the Nation of Islam in the 1950s and 1960s. And now let's talk about this site. As you can see, this site is hidden. And this is not coincidence. Lansing has done all it could to remove the history that Malcolm X ever lived here. And so when grassroots organizers organized to create this monument, it is not up here where the monument should be. Right here. That's right. It's tucked away. And to even see the back part, look what you have to do to even see the back of the monument. After grassroots people in Lansing organized this marker for Malcolm X. After they did that, and they got this up here after their hard work, like the brothers trying to do in Inkster. So people did that here and created this. They renamed the street Martin Luther King, as a smack in the face to the history of Malcolm X. It was done on purpose. Martin Luther King done enough to have a street named after him in his own right. But they picked this street on purpose because they were trying to smack the people who wanted to create this history of Malcolm X, trying to smack them in the face. Because they never wanted to be talked about that Malcolm X lived in Lansing. Because the history of Malcolm X in Lansing is a sorry history. To tell the truth, it's a sorry history. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But, so on the night that Earl Little went out, the night that he was murdered, Earl Little, they raised chickens. And they sold chickens to people in the community. He would deliver the chickens, and then after a week or so, people got to go to work and get paid. He would go pick up his chicken money. And so on that night, he was going to pick up his chicken money. And it was storming that night, it was rainy. Even in the Spike Lee movie, they at least acknowledged the fact that it was raining, it was storming that night. So he goes out, his wife tells him, don't go tonight. I just don't feel right, don't go. He's like, we need the money. I gotta go. We gotta have the money. So he goes out because they need the money. He goes out and he's murdered. The Black Legion, I told you, already had chapters here. He was well known. Earl Little was well known in this community because it wasn't, thousands and thousands and thousands of people living here. So he was well known in this community as a member of the United Negro Improvement Association and an organizer for Marcus Garvey. So him being out at night by himself, stormy night, Black Legion apprehended him, beat him, and left him on the streetcar. Basically, he was probably going to die anyway from the beating that he sustained by them. But of course, by them leaving him on the streetcar, his head was almost severed from his body by the streetcar, and he was murdered. Nah, maybe they just decided to change the name.
Was it ever Malcolm?
But this was Pleasant Grove Elementary when Malcolm went here. It is now Pleasant View Magnet School. This is Pleasant Grove Elementary. The name is changed. Yeah, this the specific focus here is the arts. The specific focus at Pleasant View is the arts. The name has changed. Maybe it's just coincidence, you know. They just happened to change it.